Recorded live from Portland, Oregon, it's the Transamorous Network podcast. Let's get it on. It's the Transamorous Network. I'm Perry.
I'm Remy.
Good morning. This is Shannon.
Hey, Shannon.
Hi.
It's been a good day.
Great day.
So
Yeah,
far. We got some really great things in mind. And we're going to jump right into it.
I know.
because
Usually we like to run around and talk about some stuff, but not today. We got a really great guest.
We got a really
huge
great
guest. Big guest.
Yep.
Huge.
She's
Very
huge
excited.
and big. She's bigger than we
Very
are
excited.
because she's got the full screen. It's Sarah McBride from... Actually, we're just going to say Sarah McBride.
Just say Sarah McBride.
Hey, girl.
Speaking
Welcome.
of that,
Yes.
quick disclaimer, both Sarah and I are heavily involved with the Human Rights Campaign, and the opinions and words expressed by both Sarah and I are not representative of the Human Rights Campaign, but are our own opinions and feelings.
Wow.
So,
That was like you were reading from a script.
right?
It's like the end of a drug trial.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Asterisk, asterisk, don't sue me, asterisk, asterisk.
So, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thank
How
you.
you doing? How you
having me on.
doing? How you doing?
How are you
I'm doing well. I mean, it's still as working through the results of the election and sort of figuring out how we all move forward, but doing as well as can be.
I swear to God, I'm an endless optimist, and I do think that some positive things can come to this, but they're so hard to engage with. It's just, so puppies.
We have
right.
we have
I like
something
waffles.
we have something in mind here at the Transamorous Network that will brighten everyone's spirits about the election. The campaign we're going to be running. We're not going to say it.
We're all looking at Perry
We're
like,
not going to
what?
say it. We're not going to say it, but we have a surprise.
Oh, yeah, we have a
Yes.
secret squirrel plan coming up.
Yes. It's going to lighten up this whole election.
What a cliffhanger.
Right?
Oh, right?
Well, our last cliffhanger was you.
Yes.
Our big secret special
Always
guest.
wanted to be a
We have
cliffhanger.
been, yes.
So, for those who don't know Sarah McBride, just to get a little political, was or is the first, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, the first trans woman to ever speak at a national level convention, right?
So far, first trans person. So
Period.
Right.
There you go.
let's
Awesome.
let's hopefully change that. So we have some trans men and gender non-conforming people at some point. But
Awesome.
yeah,
Here,
first
here,
trans.
here.
I'm on board 100%. By the way, do you prefer, as your identity, affirmed female, trans woman? Like, what's your word?
I say I'm a transgender woman. For me, or trans woman. For me, though, they're two separate words. I don't usually combine the word, and so like my trans identity is separate from my identity as a woman. As much as they interact, they're
I like that.
two separate things.
I like that too,
I
actually.
feel
Yeah.
that. I feel that. I feel that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Wow, because your identity is always your identity. So you've been a woman, you've always been a woman, but the path you
Yeah.
took to get there is the transgender part of it.
Right,
Wow.
right. And I
That's
mean-
wow.
Yeah, for me, my
Stealing
trans
that.
identity is my journey, my gender background, whereas my gender identity is that of is woman, and they interact, but they're distinct identities.
Here.
So,
Yeah.
one of the things that makes you really interesting as a guest, Sarah, is the relationship that you had, or still have, if you consider him as eternal. We wanted to get into that, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, tell us about.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so for our guests and listeners, we did a show right
Yes, we
after the
did.
National Convention where we actually spoke about Miss Sarah here and your speech. And there were some things that I pulled out of that regarding your husband that I just thought was really amazing. And we wanted to hear more of that story. So
Yeah. Well, I guess to give a little bit of a background, after I came out as transgender, I came out in about
Just in case it gets
just
tear
in case
jerky.
this brings up. I came out as transgender in 2012, and I was serving as student body president at American University, which is a college in Washington, D.C. at the time. And shortly after I came out, I actually met a transgender man named Andrew Cray. Andy, at the time, was a transgender advocate, an attorney. He was working at a place called the Center for American Progress, which is a progressive think tank here in Washington, D.C., where he was working on trans health issues. And quickly, we became friends, and actually, we pretty quickly fell in love and started dating. I moved in, and shortly after I moved in with him, he was diagnosed with cancer.
What kind of cancer?
It was oral cancer.
Oh.
So it was actually a tumor in his tongue that, initially developed as what felt like a sore. And it just didn't go away, and it didn't go away. And he went in to get this sore or lesion off of his tongue. We weren't worried. Halfway through this sort of minor outpatient procedure, the doctor comes out and is like, this might be a little bit bigger than we thought, and we didn't want to take too much of the tongue, so we're going to sort of stop the procedure. And then a week later, he got the news that it was actually a cancerous tumor. And he underwent surgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. He had his part of his tongue actually removed, and a section of his arm put in and reconstructed his tongue. He had to relearn how to talk and eat and speak and really do everything that we use our tongues for. And he then underwent radiation and chemo, eventually got a clean bill of health. And we sort of went on our way, and it seemed like we had, as two young transgender people, falling in love and working for the community we love, a world of possibilities and potential before us. And then shortly after we actually went to Wisconsin for his family reunion, he developed a cough about 8 months after he got the clean bill of health. And he went in, his primary care physician asked him to go get an x-ray, and the x-ray actually showed that there was a growth in his lung. He went to the hospital and got the news that his cancer had returned. It had spread, and then 2 days later we found out that it was terminal. And actually before he found out it was terminal, but after he found out that his cancer had returned, I had always known that if his cancer was returned, that it would likely be a terminal situation, because my brother's a radiation oncologist, and I asked him a ton of questions that I didn't feel comfortable asking a doctor in front of Andy, and sort of knew what would happen if the cancer came back, and that the likeliest place was his lungs, and that if it did, it was not good. So I knew that it was terminal. He didn't know, and in that sort of 2 to 3 a day period, he said, "If this turns out to be terminal, will you marry me?"
Oh.
And, I, even sort of knowing that it was going to be terminal, I said, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Don't start thinking like that until you have to. I wanted to maybe sort of ease him into the situation that we were in. And then he, about a day later, did get the news that it was terminal. And on the way back from the hospital, I said to him, I know you asked me that question the other day, and I want you to know that the answer is yes. And initially we thought he had about a year left to live. But about 2 weeks after he got his initial re-diagnosis, his situation, his health deteriorated rapidly. We decided to sort of have a shotgun wedding. Our friends and family organized a wedding in 5 days.
Wow.
Really incredible. I mean, we gave them basically our color preference, and they just went and designed an entire wedding for the rooftop of our building, which has just these incredible 360 views of Washington, D.C. And so we ended up getting married by one of our dear friends, Gene Robinson, who's a former bishop in the Episcopal Church, first openly gay bishop in all of Christendom. And we got married in front of about 50 friends and family members as Andy's health continued to deteriorate. And then 4 days after that, he actually passed away. And I shared that story at the convention on the stage for a couple reasons. One, because for me, it's helpful to tell the story and feel like I'm sort of carrying Andy's legacy and work with me, and that Andy continues to help open hearts and change minds even after he's passed, in me sharing our story and the story of our relationship. Also, because I wanted to demonstrate to all those folks who are watching the convention that obviously there's a lot of unfinished work, but that at the center of this debate around trans equality are real people who hurt when they're mocked, who hurt when they're discriminated against, and who just want to be treated with dignity, respect, and fairness. And to the degree that my relationship with Andy, that Andy's life and legacy can help do that, then that's a silver lining in all of this. But for me, and I'll just sort of end with this, for me, I think some people get angry after losing a loved one. Some people, question why. And I've never sort of been the type of person that gets angry at something that I can't, that has no blame, right? Like the cells in his body never made a conscious decision to become cancerous. There was nothing in this world that was tangibly responsible for Andy's passing. But what is a choice, and what didn't sort of make me angry at the end, was the fact that Andy only had a quarter of his life as his authentic self. He came out in college, which is an early age, and he had the bravery to say to this world that tells us that who we are is wrong, that he wouldn't spend one more day hiding. And what angers me and what upsets me is that delay in coming out, even at an early age relative to others, meant that he only had a quarter of his life as his authentic self, that other people have even less time than that. And it reinforced for me the urgency of this cause and the urgency of this fight, that every single day matters when it comes to building a world where every person can live their life to the fullest. So that's what I carry with me. That's a not so brief overview of what we went through. It obviously doesn't include all of the incredible, wonderful, joyful, non-tragic moments in our relationship, but it is sort of an overview of the love that I shared with Andy and the lessons that I took from it.
Do you so you're familiar that we talk about stories here at the Transformers Network as the thing that informs one's life, and I'm curious. You said some things during this telling of this story that indicates a particular worldview. You mentioned not being, you don't tend to get angry at things where there's nothing or anyone to blame, and I wonder if you can describe your outlook on dating prior to you meeting Andy, and how you think that outlook affected the opportunity you had to meet Andy, if you think it had an effect at all.
That's a good question. I guess everyone's dating history is unique. Mine's unique from the perspective of Andy was the first person that I dated after coming out as transgender, and I think my relationship with him really provided me a degree of comfort and confidence and security in myself to now that carry that with me into the dating world after his passing. I think my dad. I don't know if my dad had a different way of describing this, but I would say that Andy sort of felt like the first person that I felt really saw me as the woman that I am. And I don't want to say that we need a partner to validate our identities, or that we need a man in this case to validate our identities in particular. But when you feel so unseen for so long, you can't help but feel an incredible sense of liberation and freedom when you finally do feel seen. And for Andy, that was the first. He was the first person to really do that for me. I would say that and I still struggle with this, that I've always been someone who really has to know someone to fall for them and to be attracted to them. I'm not really attracted to sort of the stranger on the street or the person I meet in the bar, and so it's always sort of a challenge in dating for me, because it takes so long, and inevitably with even the best person, there's a period early on where I'm not, I'm not as into it as someone who maybe has oftentimes instant attraction can be. But Andy was persistent enough with me to sort of give me the opportunity to fall for him, which is it's a challenge in the dating world when that's sort of the way you operate. But I think for me, I am so blessed by the opportunity to have met and fallen in love with Andy, and the experiences I had with him, both the good and the bad, have been such formative experiences for me, and have shown me just how much a relationship can be a blessing to someone. That relationships really can be potentially the most profound expression of grace in this world. That it's really taught me to I guess give relationships a chance in a way that I didn't before, in a way that I was more likely to sort of shut things down before. And I think it gave me the permission and the insights to realize that to give myself the time to explore a relationship, and to not shut it down so quickly. Because if I had done that with Andy, I would have never, I would have missed out on such an amazing opportunity to grow with him.
So it sounds like the dynamic between the two of you was perfectly matched, in that you're not the kind of person who's going to fall for someone just by how they look, or even just really be attracted based on how they look.
And let's be clear, he was a very attractive man.
I'm sure he was, yeah.
Yes, that's a correct, yes.
And at the same time, he was someone who was persistent enough in his attraction to push through that.
Yes.
Which gave you the runway, if I can use that word, to actually fall in love with him. Had he not been that kind of person and just said, well, screw this woman, she's not showing me any interest at all.
Which is entirely reasonable.
Right, exactly.
It's entirely reasonable for him to, say, this is unfair of you to sort of, I don't know, drag me along or lead me on or whatever. It would have been entirely fair for him to say that. But yes, he was, for whatever reason, was patient enough with me to give me that space.
That goes into showing, stories matching up.
Yeah, exactly.
You being in a place where the story you're telling yourself about life and relationship matches. Matches on some level where he is in his world and how he feels about relationships, and that there was the perfect syncing for that to come together. And I think it's amazing. I think I said this after your speech, that what you've taken from your experience with him was and has been motivational and inspiring and fuel to keep you going to become all that you've become and to be the first trans person at a national convention, right? You didn't slink into sadness and sorrow or whatever about his passing, that you actually have used that as
rocket fuel.
I
have to say, I listened to the conversation you all had after the convention.
Uh-oh.
And what I was going to say is, for a conversation, first off, it's surreal to listen to people talk about your relationship. Folks that you don't know super well, to talk about your relationship and hear it. But I have to say that in with the little information that you all had from the speech, you all had an incredibly accurate conversation around my mindset and what I went through and how I sort of moved forward after his passing. And so I just wanted to say that it was actually a really sort of spot on conversation. And I want to say that observation in particular, that we were sort of the right people for each other at the right time, and that our paths sort of almost perfectly synchronized, is really true. Like I said, he was the first person to really see me. He was the first person in a deep way. He was the first person that I felt totally whole and seen by. And also, frankly, he was someone who was by my side when I went through a lot of my transition-related care. And I don't usually talk about that a lot, but I think it's important to recognize his contributions and support for me in that aspect of my life. And then, conversely, I was there for him as the primary caregiver through his treatment for cancer. I was there, we were at a stage in our relationship where we were able to get married 4 days before he passed, in sort of a last bucket list kind of thing for him. And that is, as tragic as the circumstances are, such a fortunate thing to have occurred. And I think someone actually asked me, I was speaking to a class the other day, and we were sort of talking about, what's the best thing about being transgender? And, part of my answer was, well, I'm proud to be transgender because I think it's actually been a path that's made me a stronger and a better person.
Mm-hmm. No doubt.
But also, I can't remove from that the fact that if I hadn't come out, if I weren't transgender, and if Andy hadn't come out, and if he wasn't transgender, we would have never met.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have never had the relationship that we had, which is, I think, like I said, been such a blessing for me. So it's a reminder for me how wonderful it is to be trans, and how incredible our community is, and just how incredible transgender people are. And I'm thankful every day that, my path was the exact path that it was, because it led me to him.
So I have a quick question for you, Sarah. So often when we tell these incredibly powerful stories, like right now, my heart is just beating. Mm-hmm. And I know that many of the people listening to this right now and watching this right now, their hearts are in the same spot. If you could offer them a takeaway or a call to action to take that emotion and move it to something tangible, like what would you say, that what did you learn? Like, how did it steer your life, and how could we, as people who are inspired by your story, take that and help it, steer the direction of our life?
And before you answer that question, let's take a quick break.